We are at a historic inflection point, a moment of raw power where military action has forcibly reshaped the geopolitical chessboard. The high-stakes gamble of the Trump administration has, for the moment, paid off after the devastating Midnight Hammer airstrikes that turned Iran's primary nuclear facilities to radioactive rubble. The Islamic Republic has, against all expectations, blinked. They have agreed to direct bilateral talks in Muscat, Oman, under terms dictated by Washington. Tomorrow, on February 6, 2026, President Trump's personal envoys will sit across from Iran's top diplomats, not to negotiate a compromise, but to discuss the terms of a strategic surrender. This is not diplomacy as we knew it. This is a Trump Doctrine 2.0 in its purest form, maximum pressure, executed with overwhelming force, designed to compel a panicked adversary to the table on your terms, not theirs. The stakes could not be higher. A landmark deal that dismantles Iran's nuclear ambitions for a generation. Or a second, catastrophic wave of strikes that plunges the entire Middle East into war. Let's rewind the timeline to understand how we reached this precarious moment. On January 15th, President Trump issued a public 72-hour ultimatum via Truth Social. Iran was to verifiably dismantle its advanced centrifuges. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed Tehran was hovering at the brink of weapons-grade enrichment. Iran called the bluff on January 22nd. The United States called the check in a meticulously planned operation dubbed Midnight Hammer, a combined force of stealth F-35 fighters, B-2 Spirit bombers, and over 200 Tomahawk cruise missiles struck simultaneously. The targets were the heart of the program: the Natanz enrichment complex, the Fordo fuel enrichment plant buried deep within a mountain, and the Arak heavy water reactor. Initial assessments suggest the program has been set back 5 to 7 years, at a cost of over $2 billion in advanced munitions and 0 U.S. casualties. Iran's response was fierce, but strategically limited, a telltale sign of weakness. Proxy groups threatened retaliation. Missiles were fired at commercial shipping lanes and intercepted, and fiery rhetoric filled state television. But the regime did not trigger a regional war. It did not launch a direct attack on U.S. bases or allies. Behind the scenes, the calculus in Tehran had shifted. Satellite imagery showed the scale of the destruction. Their primary deterrent and source of regional prestige was gone, facing economic collapse with hyperinflation and a currency in freefall, and with key international patrons like China offering tepid support at best. The path of continued defiance risked national extinction. A second strike, which U.S. intelligence suggests would target the leadership's conventional military power and regime security apparatus, was an existential threat they could not absorb. This brings us to the historic concession. Through Omani intermediaries, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi sent a critical message to Trump envoy Steve Witkoff. Iran would agree to bilateral talks, with the agenda strictly limited to the nuclear file. Crucially, they agreed to exclude any discussion of their ballistic missile program or their network of regional proxies, the very concessions the Trump team had sought. By accepting, President Trump boxed Iran into a corner. They would be negotiating their core security issue alone, with no Russian or Chinese mediators, and without the ability to leverage the threat of Hezbollah or the Houthis as bargaining chips. It was a masterstroke of diplomatic jiu-jitsu, using the enemy's desire for focused talks to isolate them completely. Now, observe the teams. Representing the United States is a trio of Trump's most trusted confidants, operating outside traditional channels. Steve Witkoff, a longtime friend and fundraiser, serves as a personal conduit. Jared Kushner, architect of the Abraham Accords, brings relationships with Gulf states that would benefit immensely from a neutered Iran. And Steve Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary who engineered the maximum pressure sanctions that crippled Iran's economy years ago, is a sanctions czar. They face an Iranian delegation led by the pragmatic Araqi and hardliner Ali Bagheri-Khani, a team divided between damage control and ideological resistance. The table is set with maximalist, non-negotiable U.S. demands: permanent zero uranium enrichment on Iranian soil, the complete dismantlement of all centrifuge arrays and anytime, anywhere inspections by the IAEA, Iran's red lines preserving some enrichment and protecting military sites from inspectors, are directly opposite. The American ultimatum is clear and public: agree to a verifiable framework within 72 hours of the talks concluding, or face Midnight Hammer. Phase 2. Targeting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' command structure and Iran's economic lifelines. The global reactions tell their own story. Traditional Iranian allies have offered muted support. Regional rivals like Saudi Arabia and Israel are openly celebrating a historic opportunity. The markets, which initially spiked on war fears, are now pricing in a deal, with oil prices retreating from their peaks. for President Trump. The domestic political calculus is clear. On the eve of the 2026 midterm elections, this represents a potential Reagan-esque triumph. It combines a demonstration of overwhelming military strength with a diplomatic coup, moving to permanently solve a generational security threat. A successful deal would be framed as the ultimate America First achievement, peace through undeniable strength. The failure, leading to a second strike, would be sold as unnecessary defensive action to protect the homeland, likely rallying the nation behind the commander-in-chief. We stand on the razor's edge. The talks in Muscat are not a negotiation between equals. They are a forum for a weakened adversary to formalize its retreat under the unambiguous threat of total ruin. The world will be watching tomorrow to see if Tehran's diplomats have come to sign, or if they have come to be the messengers of their regime's final, fatal miscalculation. The jets are fueled. The missiles are programmed. The power to choose which path history takes now rests in a conference room in Oman. This is a moment where 21st century statecraft is being rewritten before our eyes.